So good morning, everyone. Welcome back to day 3 of the Congress. We hope you had a good time yesterday, whatever you ended up doing in terms of your evening hours. And I was trying to follow some of the social media of the Congress, and I've seen that some of you have been very active. But please, share your moments if you like. Let us know how it goes and what you enjoy about the Congress. I mentioned yesterday that there will be a final session today, starting at 4:15. That will be after the final plenary, the plenary number 6, rather. So again, that would be an opportunity for all of us to contribute to thinking about imagining all things possible for small-scale fisheries of Europe. So we'll start today, of course, with this very important session. We're talking about imagine small-scale fisheries-centric governance. And for this session, we have a great privilege to have two chairs who are members of the steering committee, Christina Pita with you in the room, and Jania Penka, who is joining virtually. So I will turn over to Christina and Jania to take it from here. Thank you very much.
Hello, good morning. Janaya is the co-chair of the session. She couldn't be here. She's in Morocco at the moment, but she's over there with you. That picture, the only person on the screen right now. So I will start with a few words and then I pass it on to her to try to be as inclusive as possible. Thank you for being here. The brave ones, third day at 9 o'clock in the morning is always a day for the brave ones in any conference. We're going to be talking about could you put the introduction slides? Then I will pass on to Yerneja for her to say a few words, but maybe it's easier to just introduce a bit the topic to start with. So a picture already from Malta. I do like the traditional boats a lot. So we're going to be talking today about imagining small-scale fisheries-centric governance. And that's me. Next slide, please. Start.
Sorry, Christina, sorry.
Yes.
We're still waiting for the slide to come on to the virtual people. So just a second here.
Oh, yes, of course.
Thank you.
Is that okay? Not yet?
Not yet.
And I'll go back again. And it's moving on its own, and I'll go back again. Let's see who's more stubborn, and that would be me. So, not. Can you see it online, Ratana?
Not yet.
Not yet. People online cannot see the slides. Okay. That's fine. Sorry. Well, on a good note, the room gets packed. So there's more people now than there was 2 minutes ago. So that's great.
And now we can see it. So go ahead, please.
Perfect. So today, last day, we're going to end by talking about small-scale fisheries-centric governance. I think we covered this topic a bit on previous sessions, especially in the ones that José was leading. Yesterday, we talked a bit about it. Just a little quick introduction. Next slide, please. Don't know why, but yes, okay, there you go. So imagining small-scale fisheries-centric governance. The ocean governance stands high on the political and public policy agenda of European states for many years already. Yet ocean governance is kind of a very complex process and faces many challenges within and beyond states. It's a reflection of the multiple dimension and interconnection role the oceans play in environmental sustainability, economic prosperity, and human well-being. Ocean governance requires the effective and inclusive participation of multiple stakeholders within and across sectors and scales. It requires governance arrangements which address inequalities, secure the rights of local coastal communities, providing fair, equitable access to coastal spaces, fishing grounds, aquatic resources, and seafood markets, while respecting at the same time the traditional livelihoods of people that have depended on coastal areas for centuries. So how can we imagine a differentiated approach to governance and management of European small-scale fisheries with structures, institutions, and processes improving collaborative, inclusive, equitable, and fair governance at local, national, and European scales? And to talk about that, we have three guests. Sebastian, we're going to start with this order. Sebastian Link from the University of Gothenburg is going to talk a bit to us about the case in Sweden. Cosmin Shivu from the International Ocean Institute, which is going to give us a perspective about education and how that improves participation in the governance process. Marta Cavalli from LIFE, the Low Impact Fisheries of Europe platform, that's going to give us the perspective of small-scale fishermen around Europe. And then we finish with Lina Westland, that is going to talk about the Mediterranean case, maybe a bit of more positive end to the session. I also wanted to, could we stop the slides and see Jerneja again? I am co-chairing this with Jerneja Penka, who could not be here. She is in Morocco at the moment. So we are co-chairing, and also with Rosé, a bit of an unnamed co-chair of the session, is also here. So I wanted to start by giving a bit of time to Jerneja, since she's far away, to be as inclusive of people that are online as possible. So Jerneja, do you want to say a few words about the topic?
Thank you, Christina. Thank you to all the organizers for putting up such a great event. And I say great because I hear it from people that are present, that it actually is very lively, and that inspires us who can't be with you as well. I think some short introduction has been given by Christina. We will be looking at various perspectives in governance. And the one thing that I particularly like about this Congress, and I think it's very important to keep in mind, is its focus on the positive narratives and imagining what is for us to be wished for, rather than just sort of analyzing the state of the art, which of course is important, but we need to make a step ahead. I am also, my research is in the area of transformative change, which thinks of all the processes and behaviors and relations that could change things for better in creating the state of societies where we can live with the nature and be more sustainable in the future. And I think it's very important for us in this session, as well as in the Congress overall, to keep that in mind. I look forward to the contributions and to discussing with all of you.
The same here. I don't know if José, putting you on the spot, if you want to say a few words, but otherwise we can actually start. And without any further ado, I would call first Sebastian Link to come and start the panel sessions. Thank you, Sebastian.
What's the green? Okay, thank you very much, Christina. Thank you all for organizing this conference and the opportunity to talk here. I will present a Swedish case now. We have heard briefly yesterday from Bengt Larsson, the Swedish small-scale fisher. I don't know if he's here now, about the problems for small-scale fisheries in Sweden. And I will, in this talk, sort of go a little bit deeper into the causes of the problems with representation and of small-scale fisheries interests in Sweden. This is a paper that we entitled Institutionalizing Injustice. And what we are after here is to probe or explore the alignment of different governance orders for justice in Swedish small-scale fisheries. It's a very sad story, I can tell you from the beginning, again, as Bengt also said yesterday. But what I try to do in the end is to lift and ask what can we learn from this, and how can we maybe not only imagine the unimaginable, but imagine and maybe work for, contribute to finding alternative approaches that are more conducive and more helpful to support small-scale fisheries. Okay, I have lots of animations in my talk and realized that was a very stupid idea with this system here. Just briefly about the research background. I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce my co-authors. I did this study together, we wrote this paper together, which I will talk about more in a minute, together with my colleague Maris Boyd-Gillette from my department at the University of Gothenburg, and with Svein Jentoft from the Arctic University in Tromsø in Norway. And we are all, when I say we, that's also a group of social scientists studying fisheries at the University of Gothenburg now, including Milena, who's here, and Victor, who's here, and my colleague Maris there, who talked already on Monday here online. We're interested in the social, political, and cultural aspects of fisheries governance in the EU and Sweden. I've worked a bit on EU fisheries governance before, but we're focusing now on governance of small-scale fisheries in what is often called fisheries-dependent communities. A very complicated term. But we have a project that is called Fishing for Solutions that Maris introduced on Monday here in a session, Community Economy and Sustainable Coastal Development in Sweden, to which this talk and the paper connects that I'm presenting here now. Next slide, yeah. And here we are. This is a chapter in the book on blue justice, published by Svein Jentoft, Ratana, Alicia, and Moniba Isaacs earlier this year. And in this chapter of the book, we are investigating the effects of the existing fisheries governance for Swedish small-scale fisheries. And we build on a framework that is developed in this book. It's fetched out in the first chapter there by Svein, with 3 governance orders. At first, we look at the principles for justice in small-scale fisheries. That's the third or meta order in this table that you see here. In the second step, we look at the institutional system, the institutional characteristics, rules, are they supportive or discriminative for small-scale fisheries? How does the institutional system work for small-scale fisheries, so to say? And then in the third step, we look at the first governance order, which is the practice, the daily interactions and the power relations that small-scale fishers are affected by in their daily lives on a daily basis. So this is a framework that I will use also for presenting the results in this talk now. This leads us to a kind of complicated research question that I put up here, but it entails what I just said. We are interested in how the governance system at the national and EU level enables democratic participation of small-scale fisheries in just and institutional arrangements and delivers or not interactions and outcomes that small-scale fisheries experience or can experience as just. Here's just briefly to the methods and data that we used. We look at national and EU policy documents. We did a survey among all, which we sent to all Swedish fishers with a license. That was about, I don't remember exactly, 700, 800 people. We got 351 responses, and of those, we classify 275 as small-scale fishers according to the European definition of fisheries. So that was a work that was led by Maris Boyd-Gillette and published in a report in Swedish in 2020. We asked questions about memberships in producer organizations, political representation, participation, and we also got open questions where we got comments on the experiences of where participants could convey their experiences to us. That was 186 people wrote comments in this survey. Just one slide about the background or some features of the Swedish fisheries management system. We have two agencies that are responsible for fisheries in Sweden. One is called the Swedish Agency for Water and Marine Management, SWAM. It is managing the fish, so to speak, dealing with quota issues. And then we have the Swedish Board of Agriculture that is dealing with the fishing industry, with the markets, and also with fishing communities and community developments. The flag system, for example, has been under their auspices. The fishing sector is organized in producer organizations, which I will talk quite a lot now in this talk, which is sort of a market-oriented governance system. And there is no, at the time we studied, national producer organization that really represents small-scale fisheries interests, which, as I will show with these empirical results here, is a problem for small-scale fisheries because it's disfavoring small-scale fisheries and coastal fisheries interests in the system. As Mara already mentioned on Monday, fishing communities in Sweden are sort of struggling very much with this way to find ways to work from the bottom up in the system. Particularly, we work together with one major initiative on the Baltic East coast called Simrishamn, that's a municipality, and they formed an initiative and tried to work more from the bottom up. We've called this attempts to swim upstream, which this study relates very much to. Okay, in the next 3 slides I will present the empirical results from the study and then try to draw some conclusions from there. Here are some quotes from the Swedish documents, the strategy for fishing, a national strategy, and put a very strong commitment to sustain and support small-scale fisheries, as you can see in these quotes here. Fisheries should produce the greatest socio-economic value for society, for example. It's important for rural enterprises are highlighted here, for local and regional markets. But also the diversity of the fleet is very much acknowledged in these documents and seen as important, as you can see in the quote to the right here. That small-scale fisheries is also seen as contributing a positive image to commercial fishing, it's said in this strategy. That far to the images again. Similarly, on the EU side, we've heard that yesterday in the talk from the person from the EU Commission, particularly in the last CFP reform, small-scale fisheries got a very, is highlighted as very important, an important role in the social fabric, as this first quote says here. Decisions that concern the small-scale fleets should be taken as close as possible to the coastal community. That's a quote from the Green Paper that came out in 2009. So that's the never attained subsidiarity principle of the EU. But also, as we heard before here, that public funding should be used to help the small-scale segment to develop. That's, for example, the structural fund, EMFF and MFAF now, for example, through the flag system, which I will return to in the end of my talk. Here are 2 quotes from the new regulation of the CFP. I think it's interesting, these words. I looked up that yesterday. All these, the regulation always says what should be done. The CFP should contribute to a fair standard of living of small-scale fisheries, and member states should endeavor to give preferential access to small-scale fisheries. So there is the responsibility and accountability obviously lies with the member states. So I think that's an important issue that should not be forgotten, that that's not the EU's responsibility, but the member states. Okay, that far to the principles in the documents that we looked at. To the second governance orders on the institutions that governing small-scale fisheries. On the national level, throughout Europe, we find today the producer organizations. In some countries they existed before, but they were installed also in the same time with the last CFP reform in a top-down manner through the EU's CMO, that's the Common Market Organization, to represent also the interest of fisheries in EU member states. They have the goal to link market considerations with fisheries management, and they set up they should facilitate the creation of POs to empower small-scale fisheries, and as this was, including a gender approach to fisheries policies. That's from a fact sheet from the European Parliament here. So on the national level, it's producer organizations, POs, that represent all fishers, including small-scale fishermen. And on the EU level, we have the system with advisory councils that we looked at in this paper again, that have been set up exactly 20 years ago, or outcome of the CFP reform in 20 years ago, for the involvement of stakeholders in this system. And particularly, as I mentioned, the last reform of the common fisheries policy has put a very strong emphasis on the importance of small-scale fisheries. Here's some quotes from a delegated act on how the advisory councils should work and function. And we can find small-scale fisheries highlighted there a lot, and saying that they play an important role in economic, environmental, and cultural terms in numerous coastal communities, and that therefore it's necessary to ensure an efficient participation. And that should also include the costs of participation. It also said that the number of representatives of the small-scale fleet should actually reflect the share of the small-scale fleet in the member states. One of the results we looked at, particularly the Baltic Sea Advisory Council, is that 4 organizations have joined the Baltic Sea Advisory Council, also the EXCOM, that's the decision-making fora of this institution or this organization, which has been supported also by LIFE. So there is a possibility for striving up for representation of small-scale fisheries in these organizations, in these institutions. When we now look on the first order of governance, on the actual practices, we can find that the PO system on the national level in Sweden is not favoring participation. In our survey, only 36 of the small-scale fishers were actually members of any PO in Sweden. That means the majority is not even a member of a producer organization. As I said, there was no small-scale fisheries producer organization specifically in Sweden at the time of study. Why we are fishers not participating in these producer organizations? And the dominant answer was that there's no reason. There was a principal belief in a big national organization, but they saw the PO system not as sort of favoring their interests, as this quote says. They don't do anything meaningful for us. And of course, this has detrimental effects then on participatory and distributional justice for small-scale fisheries. I think that there's a kind of path-dependent trajectory here. By being not represented well in these institutions, small-scale fishers have no influence, no power, and that on the long term decreases their power and increases marginalization and ever more disempowerment and no influence on how the system works. If we look at the advisory councils, we can find a very similar struggle there, where small-scale fisheries interests lose out. Despite the possibility on paper and to participate in this organization, the disputes we can find are very much dominated by the large scale and large powerful fisheries associations that are represented in terms of the main national producer organizations, and they very hierarchically exert power over other stakeholders in these deliberations and negotiations against the NGOs and small-scale fisheries interests. We have published some articles about this situation in the Baltic previously. Well, if you look at what the fishermen actually said in the comments in our survey, we can find that they experience these principles are just words and talking or lip service, and that they in practice experience fisheries management as bad political decisions or a catastrophe for Swedish fishing. As one small-scale fisher wrote in these comments, the authorities, they see no difference between a boat that fishes for hundreds of millions and the small-scale fisheries. It's populistic rhetoric that shapes fisheries politics without any concern for the knowledge of small-scale fishers. So, if I might try to draw some conclusions from these empirical studies first before trying to lift up a bit. What we find in our study is a fundamental contradiction between the three governance orders, the principles, the institutions, and the actual practice of small-scale fisheries in Sweden. The value and importance of fisheries, small-scale fisheries, is well acknowledged in various principles and documents and strategies, both in Sweden and in the EU. But in practice, this is derailed by an institutional arrangement that does not allow justice for small-scale fisheries. There's no real participation or influence or power given to the small-scale fishers in neither Sweden or on the EU level in these fora. So that means that small-scale fishers have no or little chances to influence the system that is governing them, to inform principles, strategies, or design the institutions and practices that govern them. In this paper, we call that while small-scale fishers are having rights in official documents and also to official participation, they're not getting right on the first governance orders in the practical situations of negotiating and discussing their interest in these forums and bring their influence to the table, to the decision making. The typical small-scale fisheries perspective were that large-scale fishers and environmentalists and researchers and recreational fishers control fisheries politics, but they have no say whatsoever in this system. I wanted to convey that last quote here at this academic conference. One small-scale fisher wrote in our survey, "It's awful to see research taking over the fish, creating lucrative jobs for themselves, producing so-called facts that they themselves need for their survival. The fishers are completely ignored." We could make a survey among us here who feels addressed by that quote. But I think it's important to take that with us, which I found mirrored in that quote from Isaac Asimov saying the saddest aspect of life is that science gathers knowledge much faster than society gathers wisdom. So what can we do about that? How can we improve the system when we see these problems well researched and well addressed? And how can we overcome that problem to align different governance levels, the top-down and bottom-up processes, or trickle-down and trickle-up procedures? I think, and what we did here also in this conference already a bit, is to look at alternative governance approaches and what are the hindrances and opportunities, perhaps more even, to gain from them and to lift them and make them working better for small-scale fisheries, like nested governance approaches that attend to a better adjustment, at least, of top-down and bottom-up processes, so that the top-down processes can be more flexible and aligned with bottom-up processes. For example, through co-management, which I think there's a lot of interesting new experiences that have been conveyed also in one session yesterday, or from the so-called neo-endogenous approach from rural development, on which the LEADER initiative and the EU Fisheries Local Action Group system actually builds. I think there is also a lot of interesting questions and experiences and lessons to learn from that system that we have not actually addressed in this conference here. But also in different experiences on collaborative research, like participatory action research. There was a big EU project called GAP that some of you probably have been part of, published in a book from an edited volume in the Mare series from Peter Holm and others 2 years ago. But also from other research areas, like, for example, community and diverse economies research, which is a research network that a colleague of us, Kevin St. Martin from Rutgers University, is part of, and has influenced me and some others to take up that. For example, we've published a paper with Milena in a special issue on blue degrowth, where we try to bring together these ideas from the community and diverse economies research with blue growth. That's called the Swimming Upstream, the paper. Yes, I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sebastian. And we go next to the next speaker. Please keep your questions to the end. So next we'll have Cosmin talking about connecting science, literacy, and influencing decision making. Please, Cosmin.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Cosmin Kivu. I work as a project officer with the International Ocean Institute, which headquarters is coincidentally in Malta. Basically, we have, since our beginnings, we were linked, we had a clear link to the new law of the sea. And the history of the IOI is intertwined with the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea and that of Malta, which is, as you know, a nation with a long maritime history. And this organization stemmed as the fruitful partnership and friendship of two key people. One of these persons was Elizabeth Memborghese, who set up the IOI in 1972. Coincidentally, this year we're celebrating our 50th anniversary. And the other being Arvid Pardo, which was the ambassador of Malta to the United Nations. Arvid Pardo was Malta's first representative to the United Nations in 1964, and he's recognized mostly for his contribution to the development of the law of the sea. He had a twofold vision based on, firstly, that all aspects of ocean space are interrelated and should be treated as an integral whole. And secondly, that the seabed beyond national jurisdiction and its resources are the common heritage of mankind, which at that time was a novel and striking departure from earlier thinking on ocean space. On the other hand, Elizabeth Memborghese was a passionate campaigner for a world order founded on distributive justice, and therefore on the doctrine of common heritage, which she shared with her good friend Arvid Pardo. To her, the sea offered the best laboratory for the application of a set of ethical principles, guiding humanity to the equitable use of natural resources. She instituted the Pacem in Maribu series of conferences, and as I mentioned, she founded the Institute as well. At the moment, we operate as an international, non-governmental, not-for-profit NGO with special consultative status at the UN, working on upholding and expanding the principle of common heritage of humankind as enshrined in UNCLOS. And we operate through an international network of centers, focal points, alumni, and partnerships. The main aims is to create knowledgeable future leaders in ocean governance. This is done basically by conducting training and capacity building globally. And recently, we tried to expand our offering to go at every single level of education. And Also, we participate in the development of national and international ocean governance agendas. We have some takeaways with regards to the ocean literacy for policy and decision makers. And the main aim is to inspire a cadre of ocean literate policy and decision makers. This is done in order to assist with achieving SDG 14 and other interlinked targets. And also by following the goals of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, which I think we share the view that it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to create a new foundation for the science policy interface. All in all, basically we work to ensure the sustainability of ocean life and livelihood. Now, since we have pivoted to ocean literacy at all levels, just a quick definition: an ocean literate person understands the essential principles and fundamental concept about the functioning of the ocean, can communicate with the ocean in a meaningful way, and we try to inform all stakeholders subscribing to our programs in order for them to make informed and responsible decisions regarding the ocean and its resources. In a very simple way, ocean literacy is the understanding of the ocean influence on us and our influence on the ocean. Identifying a nexus of ocean literacy and governance, there are certain takeaways where it's apparent that knowledge on its own does not necessarily lead to governance. And again, enhancing responsibilities and adding more requirements, as the first panelist said, does not necessarily lead to good governance as well. What is of utmost importance is converting acquired knowledge into governance, but this proves to be a relatively complex phenomenon. Ultimately, literacy has to be directed to formulating rulemaking and decision-making in ocean governance at all decision levels. And in this regard, we've tailored our programs, especially in the recent years, to go and break down this knowledge and assist formulating policy at all decision-making levels, be it grassroots or academic and government entities. And it's also, as we'll see from a practical example in a few slides, developing and sustaining innovative approaches to small-scale fisheries requires improvements in ocean literacy at these said levels. To conclude, it is the nexus of knowledge and science application and universal rulemaking that determines the path to governance, compliance, and enforcement. Something we are working strongly on eliminating and minimizing is the knowledge governance gap. The so-called distance between getting scientific fact to policy. And in order to close this knowledge behavior action gap, we are aiming at implementing improvements in ocean literacy at all levels and creating participation mechanisms and capacity development opportunities that bring fishers, scientists, practitioners, and other interested parties in close collaboration. And this ultimately allowing for peer-to-peer learning. And ocean literacy has a clear role over here in further developments. What I meant earlier by saying that we are trying to implement capacity building at all levels can be divided in our international programs with a master's degree in ocean governance, which is offered here in Malta, and the flagship training on ocean governance policy, law and management offered in Canada. At the regional level, we can break it down on the courses offered in the following regional seas. In Malta, dealing with the Mediterranean, Baltic, Black and Caspian. We also have a course in the Western Pacific Ocean, African seas, Caspian Sea, Southeast Asian seas, and also Latin American and Caribbean seas. More recently, we also moved towards offering customized short courses which deal with local issues and challenges. These come in the form of courses on demand, but most importantly, the courses offered under our Ocean Academy portfolio, which started last year. The aim is to keep the syllabus evolving continuously by introducing the newest scientific research that comes from experts in the field. And we have various ways of delivering the trainings, either in classroom-based lectures, online, and in hybrid or even more practical approaches. On the one hand, in the more formal academic offerings, we have the Masters in Ocean Governance. But recently, we debuted last year the IOI Ocean Academy, which seeks to bring a positive change at the local level. For the first time, we've done courses in local languages, and these are delivered in 20-hour modules which are overseen by local experts. And in order to remove said barriers to ocean literacy that I mentioned earlier, we try to keep the onus of requirements for participation at the minimum, where every layperson or person who only has working knowledge in the field can join with just a smartphone and a Wi-Fi connection. What they would gain is a basic understanding of the ocean and learn about the importance of ocean governance, sustainable and equitable human use, and the principles of common heritage of humankind, while ultimately respecting the needs of future generations, while keeping this in a locally relevant context. Overall, we try to empower people to become more active locally as stakeholders, and in order for them to positively influence their communities and beyond. This is the map of the current programs we offer, and we will be extending this year as well. And one of our success stories was the course organized, the Ocean Academy course organized in Sri Lanka, which dealt with ocean governance framework for conservation and sustainable use of the ocean and marine resources. We're offering this course again at the end of the year. And it is coordinated by the Sri Lankan Association for Fisheries and Aquatic Resources. And it was designed to upgrade ocean literacy for the participants by providing an understanding of globally, regionally, and locally relevant ocean information and knowledge at an appropriate level of understanding, while fully addressing specific local needs and challenges. A key takeaway from this was that while we noticed that the participants, which were especially fishermen in the area, were very much in tune and very knowledgeable of maritime ecosystems, and they had a lot of practical knowledge, that this did not automatically translate to them owning and applying principles of sustainable management of the resources on which they depended. It was a surprising effect also that ocean literacy stopped at the professional level and it did not go at more of did not delve deeply in the challenges level. And we aim with this to reach new audiences in an easy and effective way, and move from and take that local knowledge, while also instilling the sustainable ocean governance heritage of the IOI. I think just a couple of takeaways before I conclude. Ultimately, we are trying to create a cohort of ocean literate decision levels at all levels of policymaking, and increasing the science-based ocean knowledge through that. At the moment, as we are doing with the IOI Ocean Academy program, we try to increase the regional impact while underpinning it with sound science, and in the end, enhancing protection of life and livelihoods at the coast-ocean interface and beyond. That's it. I left a quick QR code to our website over there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cosmin. And again, hold the questions for the end. And I'll call next Marta. Marta is from the LIFE platform, Low Impact Fisheries of Europe, and she's going to be talking to us about moving small-scale fisheries forward.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me well? Today it's clear, huh? Okay, so yeah, I'm here to talk about imagine-centric governance. And actually, I thought it was a very nice title, because it's actually what LIFE is also the motto of LIFE a bit, no? It's moving from small-scale fisheries from the periphery to the center. And this has been a bit our motto from a very long time. How I do that? Okay, next. But let me explain you a bit our theory of change. This is the theory of change of LIFE, and how we, as you see here, we are trying to make a systemic change through different lines of action. So you see in the beginning, the capacity building and all the support on the ground to the fishing communities to be actors of change, to be have access in the market, to really have a change in their lives in the ground. Then we need to transform the food systems, because if we don't have an appropriate food system in place, we cannot really make this change to happen. And of course, one of the main streams of action from LIFE, and it's been in the beginning like very strongly, is the advocacy part. And here is where you see that one of the main topics that we are trying to do is this improved governance. This is the outcome that we want to see somehow happening. And with what we try to do here is to be really recognized by the participation of in the CFP and international laws as well, to bring low impact fisheries in the center. With all these lines of action, we will be able to have also a better generational relief, and finally have this impact finally. So of course, then governance has a central role here. This is a bit, if we see it in detail, what we are trying to, our battles to do, to be in our strategy to 2025, which is a bit ambitious, I think, but we will work for it. Is this all about this differentiated approach to fisheries management? These are a bit the outcomes that we want to see happening, that we have talked about it, and now I will talk a bit more in the next slides. So, okay, so we've been a new CFP from many years now, 9 years, and actually we haven't really seen the change happening. We have an MTC that a lot of fishing communities saying they're lack of fish, we cannot fish anymore. There's an unfair access to fishing resources still. We have an unfair access to markets. The products are not really differentiated enough. We don't have the value of it. We have an unfair subsidies, and somehow we have a lack of generational relief. That somehow in some places they even say we are the last generation of small-scale fisheries. So this is not only kind of course, very bad for the sector, but it's also a missed opportunity here for the potential. We all have heard about the values of the small-scale fisheries and its potential to achieve wider social, environmental, and economic sustainability goals in the whole world. So actually, I mean, it's something that to be reflecting and be reflecting all those days. However, we think somehow this year is particularly important for this CFP, because actually it's been kind of the reflection on the implementation of the CFP. It's been a process now that it's going to reflect on how effective has been the CFP and how we can move forward. Maybe if we push enough, we can make it transform some of the issues that maybe is not working. And I think we have here an opportunity that we cannot miss. I think from LIFE we are really dedicated to it, but I would call on any of you that is working on the subject to really participate in this kind of reflection and put the ideas forward. Many of the issues that we have think about that it's not working, that I will tell you a bit more, it's mainly on this relationship with the European countries and the member state relationships. And how the European, even though we have a nice CFP written, somehow it's not being implemented in the spirit of the law. So in the last assembly in November, we did a joint statement of LIFE members on the implementation of the CFP, and we tried to identify a bit what we want to see happening in the future. I'm not gonna go to everything, because many of the things, like for example, using public monies for public good, we have already talked about it. Well, we have to also tackle the issue of discards, right? And how we can phase out those gears and improve management to really achieve this selectivity and end discards somehow. And also the gender equity and generational renewal issues that we had a dedicated panel. And we somehow worked with our sister organization, Actea. So these are 1 and 3. Maybe the one I would like to stop a bit more is on the fair access to fishery resources for small scale. So in its current form, Article 17 is not working. And it's not working because we have done lots of work to be on the court even, to act, to say this is not properly implemented. We have done a lot of work, and we're really saying that actually, how is it written is not properly clear. Member states just apply those principles in the way that they really want somehow, and actually still the catch record still feels it's the main reason how to implement this current Article 17. So in these reports here that we've done with our fish, we actually dedicate a whole reflection on this and how we could, and there's proposals on how we would like to see this happening, how criteria we could use to actually implement the Article 17. We want actually the European Commission has a clear defined role in overseeing the implementation of it, and have some guidelines with this criteria set on how we want this to happen. Also, of course, we want a reallocation. We want fishing rights ring-fenced for small-scale fishers, that allow a dignified life. We don't want to be rich, we want to just be a dignified life, against privatization, of course, or transfer of larger to fishing companies. We want a full transparency of the allocation of fishing quotas, because still it's really a blurred, very opaque issue. We don't know how they are allocated. And we want consequences. If a member state is not really applying, what will happen? Also, in our statement, we talk about fair access to markets and transform the food systems. We want to control these mandatory labeling schemes. There's a fabulous label that is mandatory for all to arrive to the market, but you go to the fish market and you don't see any of these labels there. You don't know how is it caught, anything. So more control to be there. And of course, promote and support short chain value schemes, control and also promote the direct marketing. In some countries, for example, direct marketing is forbidden, and it's kind of an essential system for the small scale. Of course, then the small scale also need to organize themselves and act and market their fish in a collective way, because this way they have more options in the market and prices don't go down, etc. So of course, we also ask for support and enabling policy environment to form and to recognize producers and organizations of dedicated small-scale fisheries. We were talked about before about the POs. Basically, they are a mixed organizations, and we want dedicated small-scale fisheries production organizations. But it's very difficult to get formed first because they require a lot of time. I mean, a lot of member states actually, when they set the criteria on how to do producer organizations, they base it on volume, which is not working for us. We don't have a big volume of fish. We just have small amounts. So in order to get a PO, you really have to have a lot of people with you. And that means that you have to go port by port and try to join them all. So from small-scale fisheries, dedicated organizations, producer organizations, is very costly, timely. Happily, we have done, we have FSK now, we have IMBRO that have achieved this. But in some places, recognition is an issue. We just talked yesterday, for example, with the French case. They submitted a proposal of a PO, and we still haven't had the response, so we don't know how it's going to end. But informally, it's been told that actually there's too many POs, and we cannot really, and it's not really positive this submission. So somehow we here, I think, also attack the organizational freedom, no, of organizations. Anyway, and also we would like to work towards, or that this is a line of action from LIFE, towards a participatory guarantee system scheme. I won't spend too much to talk about it, but somehow is an alternative system to the third-party certification, which we think doesn't fit our fishing sector. But I think participatory guarantee system schemes could do it, and we really would like to work towards this. Another issue that we would like to raise today is this fair access to restored fishing grounds. We want to secure wider inshore fishing areas that are reserved for small-scale fisheries, increase this protection to get restored, to get more fish in there, and that they are actually managed in a co-management regime. We'll talk about co-management now, but in order to do that, we need the CFP to recognize co-management somehow and promote and support co-management initiatives. So we have an enabling label framework that actually makes the member states to have a clear mandate that this is the way forward, and this would be very good for the sustainability of the fisheries. Why co-management? Well, for many years, the tragedy of the commons has been the main idea dominating, and the state control and privatization the only solutions for avoiding the tragedy. But in 2009, Elinor Ostrom won a Nobel Prize. She actually investigated how communities, they devised actually rules that govern the commons to assure its sustainability, and actually made this paradigm change. So if we have a community that is really engaged in the community, they are having like the sense of co-responsibility, and we can really not lose this sustainability. So actually, community-based co-management can be actually achieve sustainability, even improving the governance of the marine resources. She actually drew 8 principles. If you haven't read ever, I think everyone has to be in our Bible, what needs to be done to have sustainability. And we have to have it in mind when we are approaching the SSF sector as well. So, so we have a governance-based top-down approach in one side, and we have a community-based co-management in the management in the other side. And there's all this gradient of participative management, where co-management somehow is in the middle of two, trying to arrange this, and they shared authority in a management. So this is a bit there's no definition of co-management still agreed, but this is a bit our definition, and what we heard from many others working on the subject, it is an agreed definition. So it's a partnership arrangement between government and the local community of fishers, sometimes also connected to NGOs or research institutions and other research stakeholders, to share the responsibility and authority for management of a resource area. So actually, it could be complicated, but it's actually very simple. It's basically sitting around a table with the important people that need to be there. Why is it important? So we have an improved governance. That means that relationships, common understanding, trust, and communication is enhanced. And it could be seen as not important, but it's the key pillar by which we will have an improved sustainability in the future. Because it devolves the sense of co-responsibility by leaving power to everyone. That implies that they have the co-responsibility and will, in the future, encourage responsible fishing. Why else? Because it's more effective fisheries, because it incorporates the scientists, of course. It has been listened for once, that their advice, but it also includes the traditional ecological knowledge. And this is essential. We are talking about small-scale fisheries, and sometimes there is no enough data, as the scientist says, that we can use. And I think traditional ecological knowledge is a perfect knowledge that we could use as well to mind the gap and be complementary to the rest. Why else? Because by, of course, collective ownership of this area, they will actually, the decisions taking will be taken forward, they will be sense of ownership, and this will improve the increased compliance. Of course, that doesn't mean that we need control. Actually, we need even more control, because if there's an agreement that has been agreed with everyone, and then there's no control, and somebody doesn't comply with it, then it could all fall down, no? And we can return again to the previous tragedy and so on. So even control is very important, but that means that we will have a collective that actually will be for this regulation. What else? Because of course there's better quality data for management decision-taking process. We will have fishers there that they will understand, and they will actually be part of the decision-taking process, and they will be willing to share the data to improve and continually improving. And last but not least, because it finally will allow us to have an adaptive management. It will end the static management that you publish in a decree that nobody reads, and then you cannot change it forever. Okay, so co-management has a bit of a momentum now in the Mediterranean. There's been process going on. There's been some legislations about it, and well, few of them. One is in Catalonia, where we have people here from Catalonia joining us. There's few in Portugal, in Croatia, I heard yesterday, and some coming up, maybe in Malta for sure, someday, I hope. So there's a bit of a momentum, but actually, there's few places where actually co-management is really there, and as you see here. So we need an enabling framework, as I was saying before, that really enables this co-management to happen, not only in the Med, but also in the rest of Europe. So co-management is a kind of a change of paradigm. So that means that we are changing a lot of things and we need to learn about it. At Live, we always thought that this is a thing that we need to learn all together. And so this is why we are steering a bit on this focus group on co-management. First, to develop and hone this common vision and terminology, because sometimes we talk about co-management, which is maybe something that is not, etc., etc. And we need to really make sure that everybody understands what it is and what is not, and to use this terminology correctly. Then it is important actually to act as a network to help each other to see the lessons learned and how it's working in one place and what is not working and when it needs to be done and the process, and by promote this cooperation and build synergies with researchers, practitioners, etc. Then, of course, create maybe and share training opportunities, experience of lessons learned, etc., and share it with among us. And finally, of course, share this advocacy strategy to make these legal frameworks to really happen, so we can have co-management across Europe. So that's all for now. I would just like to end to say there's the time of getting value of the small-scale fisheries, I think, has passed. We all know that they are very valuable, but we need to make things change so the governance comes back and we can have this generational renewal that we want, but also healthy seas and live communities. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marta. Always a very insightful communication. And last but not least, we'll go to the last person, Lina. So we've got academia and NGOs, and now we go to the governmental organizations. So we finished with Lina, that's going to talk us about the Mediterranean.
Okay. Thank you very much, Christina, and it's very nice to be here. As Christina said, I would like to talk a little bit about governance in the Mediterranean, and in particular then through work by the GFCM, the General Fisheries Commission for the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. I also want to put this a little bit in an international context. I work for the FEO and also the GFCM, that is part of FEO. I'll come back to that a little bit in one of the slides. And I mainly work on small-scale fisheries and the implementation of the small-scale fisheries guidelines that I hope most of you know, but I will also say a few words about those in a moment. Just to recall some important facts and numbers, you have seen this before, and actually I also wanted to say that those of you who were in our parallel session on Monday afternoon will recognize some of the slides and some of what I'm saying, because my colleague Constance presented something similar, but feeling this was important, there were some things we felt could also be repeated here in plenary. So small-scale fisheries represent 83% of the vessels in the region and over half of the total employment, and about a third of the revenues created, and also a big part of the total catch. And in addition to these quantitative numbers, I think it's very important to recall again that small-scale fisheries also have other values, as they are rooted in local economies, traditions, and cultures. And they play an important role in social inclusion and cohesion. And they create value for development and also contribute, of course, to social and environmental sustainability. But I think we also have heard of the challenges that the small-scale fisheries sector face. And in a way, I mean, there are many fishers here, and in a way, I'm a bit uncomfortable speaking on your behalf, but I think, and I hope you agree that some of these challenges include, are what you face, the lack of recognition and representation, that you don't necessarily participate sufficiently in decision-making. And there is also concerns about an aging aging fishers and a lack of youth coming into the profession. And depending on countries, there's also probably an insufficient access to education, decent working conditions, to investment and credits, and also access to markets. Then we also had the COVID pandemic, and this created additional challenges. Some, I believe, are being overcome now, but especially at the beginning of the pandemic, you all know what effects it had, with considerable decrease in the vessels operating and in production, and also difficulties with supply chains not working any longer. Some of these effects have now been reversed, and it would actually be interesting to look at the situation maybe today to see where we are, because some of the numbers I have here are also not the most recent, or they're not from today, when we, I hope, in a post-pandemic situation. Before I continue, I'd then like to say a few words then about the GFCM, that is the General Fisheries Commissions for the Mediterranean and also for the Black Sea. This is a so-called regional fisheries management organization, and it's also part of FAO, but still governed by its 22 member countries and the EU. Its main objective is to, together with its members, to ensure conservation and sustainable use of marine resources, and also of aquaculture. So it works towards sustainability of the aquatic sector of the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. So in this context, it's quite natural that something like a regional plan of action for small-scale fisheries would fall under what the GFCM would like to promote. So GFCM facilitated a process to develop a plan for small-scale fisheries in the region. There were several conferences preceding this that the plan was based on, and it was signed in 2018 by 18 of the countries, and it includes then concrete actions to be implemented. It's a 10-year plan, and it looks both at the environmental and economic and social sustainability of small-scale fisheries. It's quite broad. It's not just looking at catch and production, but it goes broader than that, which is very much in line with the small-scale fisheries guidelines, or the full name being the voluntary guidelines for securing sustainable small-scale fisheries in the context of food security and poverty eradication, or the SSF guidelines. This is an international instrument that was agreed by the FAO Committee on Fisheries in 2014. And although it's voluntary, FAO members did agree on the principles and guidance in this document. And the development of the contents was very much the contents was very much given through consultations with stakeholders and small-scale fishers around the world. We reckon we had some 4,000 stakeholders in over 100 countries contributing their views on what should go into this instrument. The SSF guidelines contains a number of principles, but the core of it is probably its thematic areas that then support responsible fisheries and sustainable development. And one of these thematic areas, one of the chapters is on governance of tenure and resource management, which is more maybe conventional fisheries matters. But it also goes beyond the more conventional fisheries, what you would usually see in fisheries policy and strategies perhaps. And it has dedicated chapters to social development, employment and decent work, for value chains, post-harvest and trade. Gender equality is a cross-cutting topic throughout the small-scale fisheries guidelines, but it also has a dedicated chapter, and the same with disaster risk and climate change. The Regional Plan of Action for the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, the RPOA, has 9 main areas, and this instrument then could be seen as the regional tool for implementing the small-scale fisheries guidelines here in the Mediterranean. And these 9 main areas, they are also following the idea of the small-scale fisheries guidelines to go beyond catch and production. And one can sort of map the guidelines across the 9 areas of the RPOA, although the RPOA is structured slightly differently. So the RPOA has chapters on scientific research, data collection and management, which corresponds quite well then with the governance of tenure and resource management of the guidelines. There's capacity development, decent work and social protection, which goes hand in hand with the social development part of the guidelines. Value chain enhancement, same as in the guidelines as well on value chains. We have strengthening the role of women, which then speaks to gender equality, and climate and environment, that then refers also to the disaster risk and climate change thematic area of the guidelines. And then many of the guiding principles of the small-scale fisheries guidelines are also reflected in the RPOA. So a very good tool, I think, to implement the small-scale fisheries guidelines in this region. Now, the RPOA was signed in 2018, and quite shortly afterward, we had then this pandemic. So the implementation has maybe not moved on as fast and strongly as we would have liked to see. However, there's a whole team of organizations organized around the small-scale fisheries guidelines. And there is the group called the Friends of SSF, consisting of the organizations on screen. Many are here, or I think most of them are represented here. And we are working closely together to move this forward. We did an assessment early on to see the baseline for where we are on the different topics of the RPOA. And we are now doing a new assessment that is underway to see how the implementation is ongoing, also by member countries. From the GFCM and Friends of SSF side, one main activity has been the SSF Forum, which is part of the capacity building. I will come back to that in a moment. This SSF forum also speaks to a priority action of the RPOA, which is about empowering small-scale fishery stakeholders and the recognition that efforts are needed to strengthen the engagement with small-scale fisheries actors and to ensure that there are consultations with stakeholder organizations to understand what the needs are, and also provide increased opportunities for small-scale fisheries organizations to participate in various processes and events. And within this, there is the importance then of the role of women and young fishers that I mentioned as well as one of the challenges. So this SSF forum, which we had from the beginning planned as in-person events, but then had to be turned into webinars. We have been carrying them out now for almost 2 years, and the program this year includes 2 main areas, topics. One is stakeholder policy interface, and the other one is addressing the issue of the generational shift in small-scale fisheries. The program is on the GFCM website, and we really invite all stakeholders to take part in the webinars that are still planned for this year. And as I said, the Friends of SSF are organizing many of these, who are also here in this Congress. Now, another thing I wanted to mention, which you all know about, of course, because this Congress is part of celebrating the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture, but I still wanted to mention this specifically. This is an international year that was declared by the United Nations General Assembly, and FAO is the lead agency for the celebrations of the year. And we encourage all of you to participate and create events in the name of IAFA 2022 to be part of the celebrations. The objectives of this is to take this opportunity of this year to enhance the awareness and understanding on what is needed to support sustainable small-scale artisanal fisheries, and also promote dialogue and collaboration among small-scale fishers and with other stakeholders. So this year is really an opportunity to really draw the spotlight on small-scale fisheries. Last week in Rome, there was the FAO Committee on Fisheries, and the weekend before, we organized an SSF summit in the name of IAFA. There were about 100 fishers from all around the world coming together. I think we had people from about 40 countries. So this was one main event to celebrate IAFA, and the GFCM and the region and the Friends of SSF were also very much part of this event. Now, before I finish, I just wanted to mention a few of what I think were the main takeaways from the session we had on Monday afternoon. And I think keep coming back to this, that working together is essential, and having strong small-scale fisheries organizations. We have heard just this morning, though, that is maybe not always as easy as one would like it to be, with the issues of the POs that we heard. But in my work, which is more global, this is something we can see in many countries is a key priority, to try to get small-scale fishers together to raise their voices. On Monday, we also talked about having broader collaboration, and if you can get other stakeholder groups and producers and consumers together around common values, that is also something that can help fishers to become more powerful and more sustainable. Co-management, we talked about a lot, and this is something I also personally believe very strongly in, and it's the only way forward. We need to have participatory approaches at all levels for achieving small-scale fisheries sustainability, and also as an important part and in the RPOA as a tool to get there. We also discussed quite a lot about the role of women, and in spite of this gender equality having been a topic in many contexts for many years, there's still work to do, and there need to be some real action and effective participation of women, and something we all need to work on. And lastly, this was also discussed on Monday, this need to facilitate a generational shift so that we can continue to have a thriving small-scale fisheries sector in the region. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lena. I was going to ask for that. That was good and quick. Okay, in the good spirit of opening to the collective and adaptation, by that I mean adapting to the new technology and the way we communicate right now, and inclusiveness, all important for good governance. We are going to start with people which are not in the room, which tend to be the fishermen in decision making. So I'm going to give the voice to Janezhat for her to say a few words reflecting on the keynote presentations, and also if there's questions online, for her to put the questions to the room, and then we'll open to the room. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the plenary session speakers. I think as a group we have managed, you have managed to really address a lot of what we have been hoping for in this session. Namely, we have looked at and listed, I believe, all the key problems and issues that this sector of small-scale fisheries is facing. Namely, the lack of resource has been discussed in not in much detail, but I think this is one thing we can take as an undisputable fact. There is less and less fish for small-scale fishers to take. There's lack of access to resource, lack of access to markets, or at least as it has been posed, an unfair access to markets. And we have also heard about lack of representativeness of the sector. And one thing that perhaps hasn't been named as such, but that comes out very strongly out of the first presentation, is that there is a lack of sense of belief that the system is democratically governed. And moreover, there is a strong sense of at least in that particular country, Sweden, that things will stay like that, that there's a sense of sort of giving up on the possibility for a change. There are unfair subsidies, of course, that heavily affect the governance of the sector. And an issue that I was initially thinking it wouldn't be as addressed, but I'm pleased it was, its lack of generational renewal. However, it's precisely this last issue where I think collectively we haven't managed to come up with very convincing solutions, and we haven't articulated what needs to happen for that generational renewal to take place. And that's perhaps one thing I would like us to focus more strongly on in the discussion section. Because to a large extent, I think we have spoken of solutions. We haven't perhaps detailed them, but we spoke of the fact that, of course, co-management needs to happen. Ocean literacy needs to sort of influence the decision makers. They need to be more sensitized to also the reason of why small-scale fisheries are important. Supervision of rules and enforcement are very important. Improving market access, improving gender equality, and improving rules or arrangements that create decent work conditions. And of course, data collection and its use, as well as a better science policy interface. So all of that, those are part of the solutions, let's say. But I personally find it's not to be pessimistic, but I think we need to do a lot more work in thinking, and I would like to dedicate this brainstorming session on how far we have gotten in making the sector an attractive position for young generation. And the reason I'm insisting on this aspect, I think is quite clear. If we are talking about governance and there are no stakeholders, no actors to take central stage in this sector, what are we talking about in 20, 30 years? There might be a dwindling small-scale fishery sector without any actors to play in the sector, without anyone to fish, and without anyone to fight for the position of those non-existing fishers in the sector. So that is to say that that's my, I try to objectively portray and list the issues that have been discussed. And my point of view is that perhaps if we as a group can dedicate some space in this discussion also to thinking, are there possibilities for change in attracting young generations, and what are the concrete tools by which we can do so? I am also in my role as a co-chair, looking at of course, the online participants. I report that we had online participants, of course. They have been invited to not only post questions, but also comment, because this is essentially part of the session where we would like to discuss. We don't have any comments just yet, but we might in the future. So Christina suggests that you transition smoothly to the room, and then I'll just perhaps wave when we have some comments.
It's a great idea, actually. Thanks. Can I will also give a few words to Jose, our other chair, unnamed chair, to make some reflections on the speakers very briefly, so that we can go to the questions. You want to get up? Perfect.
Thank you, Cristina. Thank you, Jarneja, and to all the presenters. I think it has been raised in this session a good number of issues that are extremely relevant. I think that the analysis of Sebastian about the different orders of governance and how the third order may be more or less okay, but the second and third order are not okay at all, especially when you go down into the reality, is a key issue, and it's related to how this governing process is created and how the participation of different actors in this process is shaped. In the third order, frequently, most actors might participate, and in the European Parliament, we find that some of the rules look fine in principle, but when you enter into the details, they are increasingly not so fine. When a lawyer friend of us that have worked with us made us a reflection about the Article 17, she said, "Well, this is flawed. This is designed not to work," and she had reason. It looked nice, but the wording was not good enough. So I think these details, these elements, these key factors in the designing of the principles, and in how these principles are used to create institutions and to drive the real life is an element that we need to think about. And this is something that needs to be analyzed also with the light of the subsidies again. Collective action is a key element for co-management. Collective action is a key element. Co-management and collective action is something that many scholars have studied for a long time. When I was finishing my PhD in the 80s, I was reading Sven Jentoft on co-management and Evelyn Pinkerton and so on. And it was very interesting to me to analyze all this literature. And collective action and co-management is not free. It's not cheap. It has cost. And when the funding is used to make it possible, collective action for some sectors, and the same funding is not used for making possible that other sectors participate in the process, then all the scenario is flow. It's not possible to make a balance participation in this situation. And I think that what was suggested about a new way of developing POs might be an interesting idea. I think POs need to be designed in a different way to make it possible that fishery organizations, including small-scale fisheries, can be developed all around Europe. In the book that I showed you yesterday, 25 countries, what we found is that in most European countries, small-scale fisheries are not well organized. They lack collective action. They have been lacking support for collective action for decades. It's not possible for them to participate in a co-management process with this background. So changing some of the institutions, changing some of the design of the institution to make it easier, the collective action, to make it easier, the collective action that includes small-scale fisheries is somehow necessary. And in this sense, I think we need to elaborate on the ocean literacy. We need to elaborate on how the knowledge is shaped about the fisheries and about the different kind of fisheries and the governance of fisheries. And we need to think about how these developments about collective action and about co-management reaches a wider audience. Also in the Mediterranean, the analysis about the experiences of co-management in the Mediterranean and how difficult it comes to implement these initiatives is something that, of course, we need to take into account.
Thank you, Jose. I will not add anything else. I don't think there's a need. Very good summaries by both. And in the spirit of opening to the floor and collaboration, I don't know if you want to make any comments now, or we can open to the floor, which would be nice. Oh, I can see, I saw Rita's hand first. I know the person so I'll identify. Rita from WWF Portugal, please.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Rita Sá from WWF Portugal. And thank you for all the presentations. And I would like to share to you that since 2020, we have a legal framework for co-management in Portugal. It is, I think it's the first country that has a legal framework like this. I know that Catalonia, for example, has a regional legal framework, but in national terms, I think it's the first one. And in the end of last year, the government created the first co-management committee. And we are working together with all the stakeholders to moving forward with the co-management. And I have lots of learnings and thoughts to share with you. But of course, we don't have time for that. But I think it's, we have to think very deeply in this co-management process implementations, because there are lots of details, lots of issues, little issues that sometimes we think that is not so important and makes all the difference. For example, I can share with you that in the Portuguese legal framework, the government didn't include funding for the co-management committee. So it's now we are trying to advocate with the State Secretary for Fisheries to include the funding of the co-management in the state budgets to ensure that we have the money to put this in place every year. But it's in that time that we proposed to the government this legal framework. It wasn't so important. It seems we were so focused on to make sure that everyone can participate, everyone can have a voice, and everyone can take decisions together, that we didn't thought about this. Other thing that I think it's very, very important, this legal framework is just for fisheries. It's our next step is to think about a special co-management. And this is very, very important for marine protected areas, for example. And this, in Portugal, we have a kind of co-management for protected areas, but it's not real co-management. And we are trying to do like a pilot to try to understand what we can learn to propose a new legal framework for special co-management. And I think it's there are other things, like when we propose this co-management legal framework, we were working in a very, very small fishery with just 40 harvests, goose barnacle harvest in a specific island in a marine protected area. Sorry, yeah, and and now we are working in a bigger fishery, a regional fishery, and we are facing a lots of challenges to try to adapt this legal framework for this kind of fisheries. So I think there are lots of things and learnings that I can share with you in the coffee break. But I think there are lots of details that we have to think and to discuss together with everyone.
I think Rita had more of a reflection than a question. I saw that Benoit also had his hand up. So do you want to put a question quickly? I want to give the floor. Thank you, Rita.
Does it work? Okay. Hello, thank you very much for all these presentations. Very interesting, very inspiring, honestly. However, I still have the feeling that somehow we are remaining in a kind of virtual setting where we are not considering how far the small scale are embedded in a wider system with all other fishing segments. And by the way, we don't know really how to split and define these small scale segments. While low impact would be maybe another definition, and it would probably not limit our definition to below 12 meters or below 10 meters. I think that we are facing a situation with some strong reality issues we need to consider as the economic one. So the market is mainly driven by imports and then by big landings. So of course, small scale should try to distinguish themselves and create brands and market their products, but yet it's a reality we have. There is an issue of representation. We saw it, but we have many places. So some places, small scale is out of PO, but in many others, PO have been merged together and they are representing a huge variety of segments. So that's the reality we have, and it's not easy for these guys to move out or exit because they have also some advantages of being within these POs. What do I write? Yeah, the working conditions, of course. We have seen yesterday that sometimes people are forced to increase the effort, and the working conditions is impacting the attractivity of the job. And of course, renewal is a question for all the sector, but renewal in the fishing sector is a result of what is happening. It's the job is becoming to be less attractive because of several reasons. There is also the issue of resource. I mean, organization and professional organization work because they have resources and economic resources to address the issues and participate to the debates and all these kind of things. So I'm quite ready personally to imagine the I can't say it in English. Unimaginable. But yet, I think we have somehow to start from the reality. And I have done a small job last year in trying to convince the French ministry to implement the regional plan of action for the Med. Actually, they did not grasp anything of the various proposals we made, including building a PO for small scale. That was very straight to the point. The only thing they pick up was about collecting data. So, I mean, we have to face also the reality just to be more convincing about what we are proposing and how we want to move from where we are to another more ideal situation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Benoit. And I want to give I actually want to give the mic to the speakers. Anyone actually wants to put any other question? You do.
Good. Check. Thank you. This question is for Lena Westland. The small-scale fisheries guidelines are a really important way to make SSF-centric governance. And I know you said you're sort of still taking stock of how things are going, but I wanted to know, how is the incorporation and implementation of the guidelines around the world going? What are some challenges, key priority actions that we can help with?
We can start with you, Lena, in a quick kind of way.
Thank you, Evan, for that not so easy to answer question. So I talked today more about this region, but the focus in some ways of the small-scale fisheries guidelines and the efforts by FAO is more on perhaps developing countries, where because that's part of our mandate. And I would, of course, like to say that they are everywhere and being implemented, but we're not quite there yet. I think what we managed to do so far is to get them into various policy and strategies, including like now in this region to have an RPOA, and that is moving towards implementing. I think the difficulty is to really get impact on the ground, and where we need really everybody working together. FAO works with a lot of partners, and we see increased uptake of the small-scale fisheries guidelines also by other development partners, NGOs and regional organizations. Some countries have started or have developed national plans of actions for implementing the small-scale fisheries guidelines, which I think is an important step to make this more concrete. The guidelines are voluntary, Some countries are also moving towards including provisions of the small-scale fisheries guidelines in their legislation, which is an enabling factor then to make differences on the ground. Same as was mentioned for co-management, you need to have that framework to be able to move. So it's not moving fast, but it's moving, and it will continue to move. Thank you.
Thanks, Lena. I'm going to pick up on Benoit's question and Rita's and make comments and make it to a question. Maybe one for Marta. Do you think that going a bit a step back and redefining small-scale fisheries in Europe would make a difference? And then to the entire panel, does it really come down to an issue of finance? Does co-management and increased participation in Europe comes down a lot to an issue of financing for participation, and also having some openness from governments to share power, because this is always a very difficult thing as well. I'll start with you, Marta, with the definition, and you can comment on the three of them, and then I'll pass it.
Hi, hello. So yeah, the issue of definition. So it's been a discussion those days as well within ourselves, and I think, and we've been 10 years with actually a definition there that it's been there, and they could have used it to allocate quota, to allocate subsidies, to allocate everything, and they really haven't used it. So I don't know how far a definition will help, but for sure, what we think it's important by now is to avoid. Because of course, there's a lot of misunderstanding sometimes of what is low impact, but the small scale is not low impact, etc., etc. So I think what we need to improve, it's all these criteria on how we would like to go and what is we would like to aspire as low impact fisheries. And this is actually something that we have already started by all these participatory warranty system scheme that we would like to see someday. And we have identified from different values, indicators, and even a gradual kind of sense of graduation on how would be moving towards a low impact in different aspects, no? And this actually builds from the LabMath project that we shared with you, with a lot of the guidelines and a lot of already existing narrative, but we need to concretize a bit more, no? And we will actually work on a working group at LIFE to keep working on this, I think. And we would like also to join anyone that would like to support on this. So I think this is what we would like to look.
Thank you, Marta. Anyone else? Sebastian.
Yeah, a lot of interesting sort of perspectives and thoughts that are raised here. I think I would, for once, get back to the question that Jose also raised about the issue of what happens in practice, and I think that's an important role for us as researchers, what we can do. Principles and institutions, we can't build them, but we can go out and study the practice and the performativity, so to say, of guidelines, policies, principles, and how institutions work. And I think that's an important issue for us to stress and showcase it where it maybe works. What are the conditions for co-management regimes to make them work, for example, or what are the hindrances for justice or issues or others not to work, as we tried in our study from Sweden. And I think there's also one very important thing that came to my mind when I heard you talking, Benoit, about sort of the practice and how to convince managers. I think there's an important question not to sort of only imagine the unimaginable, but also ask how can we measure the unmeasurable, or convince managers and policy systems to take account of this, what is mentioned all the time, the pivotal role of for small-scale fisheries in cohesion of fishing communities. So all the value that we see so well acknowledged in documents, in words, sort of how can we sort of get beyond this focus on the only value of the traditional economic definition in percentage of GDP. I think that is an important question that we can maybe think about, how to get beyond the measurable and bring that to the policy-making system.
I missed a person, and he is a fisherman, so I really want to give him a voice, maybe the last, it's going to be the last voice, I'm aware of time. Please put, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, please go ahead.
Comment?
Yes, we can hear you.
Is it working?
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, it's a comment about, mostly about intergenerational renewal and attracting young people into fisheries. And I think, I mean, all of the initiatives that I hear people talking about, and we have plenty others that haven't been emphasized much, like training and so on, I think they are all worthless unless we have fishing opportunity. And the reason there aren't young people coming into fishing is because fishing opportunity is shrinking. It's shrinking for everybody, industrial fishers and small-scale fishers alike. And then the small-scale fishers are competing with the industrial fishers for ever decreasing fishing opportunity. And unless we can fix that, there is no amount of initiatives in the world that will bring new generations into fishing. They're not that dumb. Nobody wants to come into an industry that's dying. And the key to bringing new fishers into fishing is to make fishing something worth going into, to make our ecosystem healthy and to have increasing opportunity. I mean, the title of this forum is Imagine the Unimaginable, but the one thing that we haven't spoken about, the unspeakable, is removing fishing opportunity from larger scale industrial fishers and allocating it to smaller fishers. And that's not just quota, that's physical space. And I think unless we can see an environment where there is ever increasing opportunity for small scale fishers and for young people, then why would anyone want more young people into this industry? That's it, really.
So, a very good point, and I don't know if anyone wants to comment on it from the table very quickly, because I'm very aware of time. Pretty much we have 1 minute. That's what I mean by very aware of time. Anyone? Yes, Marta?
Yeah, I totally agree, Vale. Actually, it was one of my slides, I think, to increase space for, and that's space meaning many things, I think, but increasing space for small-scale fisheries, reserved for small-scale fisheries, and restored areas. And so they are also included in co-management units. So we are well governed in those spaces. So, yeah.
Thank you, Marta, thank you. Jerneja, do you want to have a 1 minute or less closing sentence so that I can pass it to Ratana to have her 1 minute of closing sentence as well?
Well, perhaps just linking the last two comments and actually in response to also my invitation, I think it's been very important to frame the position of small-scale fisheries as looking as one that aims at equity rather than just equality. And I think that was a wise move from the part of all of us that support a thriving small-scale or low-impact sector for various reasons, be those social, environmental, also economic impact, but more societal, wider societal impact. So it's been important, and I think it should be important also in the future to aim at equity rather than equality with large-scale fishers. And what Marta said about allocating certain space is incredibly important looking ahead to just require and insist on importance of that for for the small-scale sector. This is not to say that the small-scale sector should be advantaged. It's just asking for the right starting point for it to be at the position where it really requires to be for a sustainable future. So I think that's something that we also should be conscious of in lobbying for the sector and framing discussions.
Thank you, Jerneja. And the last, I'll give the floor to Ratana. If I can't see, perfect, you're there. If you want to say your 1 minute closing remark.
Well, I will not take that long because we are actually just on time. So thank you. It's been great presentations by the speakers, and thank you, Christina, Ginia, and Jose for the moderating of this session. It's very nice. I think at the end, we don't want we put this session about governance, right? We want it to be seen as this is something that is governable, right? Not ungovernable. But to make small-scale fisheries governable in that big context, I think we really do need to deal with a few really tough questions. How to know the unknown, for instance, right? There's a lot of things we still don't know, and we still continue to do research and etc. How to really make sure that we really are working from the third order to the second order and the first order, and that they aligned and there's no contradiction. But we also have a lot of things that we still can't speak about properly. And just now, the intervention is about how to speak the unspeakable. And I think this is so important. We have to build enough courage, I believe, in order to come up with way to talk about small-scale fisheries in a way that can really affect change. And that might actually mean, digging deeper even into something that may be uncomfortable. And also there are many things that we want to be able to put as number and figures, but we have to recognize that there are many things that are unmeasurable, right? So, but we might want to change the metric. We don't want to just continue to talk only about the GDP or, something that policy people would want to hear, but how to really bring more weight into those values and importance of small-scale fisheries, so that we can really talk a lot about, thinking about the change in the governance. I'm actually was hoping that, Sven would say something on governance, because he did write about co-management, as Jose said, right? And so how many years do we have to do the research, and how many papers do we need to write before we can really see how co-management can be implemented? But I'm actually quite inspired by the fact that it would require the legal framework. And that's happening now in many countries, that we put it into the law and the legislation about co-management. So there's still a bit of work to do, but very, very positive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, go.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I thought you had finished, and I was going to say thank you. So if you have anything else to add.
No. And I think we should go into break now.
Yes.
And let's be back. You enjoy the plenary concurrent sessions. There's still 3 more to go, and they've been very good and very inspiring. Have a good lunch, and let's be back exactly at 2 p.m. so that we can start plenary session number 6 on small-scale fisheries in the SDGs. And of course, the conversation will continue. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Ratana. Thank you, everybody, for the interesting talks. And thank you to the public, because the room is full, actually, so on the last day. So thank you very much to everybody for being here, and thank you for the talks. Thank you.